So our next presenter is Dr. Matt Helmus with Temple University, and he's here to talk about some applications available to better understand the spotted lanternfly invasion. So we're talking about modeling and accuracy right now. So Dr. Helmus, there you are. Feel free to take it away.
Well, thank you everyone for having me. So today I'm going to talk to you about predictive modeling with spotted lanternfly population dynamics. And we'll look at some of the applications that Julie talked a little bit about and that we've been developing in our collaborative project. So the goal whenever we're trying to predict spotted lanternfly population dynamics is that we're trying to understand the growth side of lanternfly, and then we're trying to also understand the dispersal side of spotted lanternfly. But before we get into these applications and these models, I just want to make 3 action points. So the first one is that predictive modeling only provides risk, and that's it. It doesn't necessarily tell you exactly where lanternfly is going to go. It just gives you risk. Predictive modeling is also forecasting. And so just like with any sort of forecast, there can be surprises that happen. And then predictive modeling also needs many different types of models. So I'm going to show you a lot of different applications. There's lots of models out there. And if you have lots of models, then you increase your accuracy and your precision. I'm going to return to these action messages at the end of the talk. So these applications I'm going to show you, they're based on predictive models. There's 2 different types of predictive models that I'll be talking about. There'll be models based on statistics. So these are parameters that are estimated from the spatial data, such as some of the data that Dr. Urban showed you. And then models based on mathematics, first principles models, like E equals MC squared type models. And those are based on parameters estimated from pest biology. Those models then go into the applications that we've developed. These are all publicly available tools that we house on our Spotted Lanternfly app dashboard. You can get to it through the Stop SLF website, and I'll give you the website at the end of the talk. So there's 3 different groups of applications on this dashboard that I'm going to talk about. The first one has to do with past spread. And basically, we're asking the question of where are SLF now? Where have they been? The second set of applications are on high-risk areas. So basically asking the question of where should we survey for spotted lanternfly? Where are the areas of most at risk? And then the third group of applications are forecasts. And so basically, what will be the population dynamics of spotted lanternfly? And then finally, we'll get at this idea of these action messages and really thinking about how complex this system is. So first, let's focus on past spread. So where are spotted lanternfly? There's different applications out there. I'm just going to focus on this interactive map that we've developed. So I'm going to switch over to that. So this is an interactive map. And yeah, everyone should see this, right? I believe. Great. This is an interactive map. You can actually take a look at how spotted lanternfly has progressed at the county scale. We have estimates of sort of the density that's been estimated in these different counties. You can see sort of that spread of lanternfly. You can also look at this density at a smaller spatial scale. So this is at a 10K spatial scale. And then also we can look at these regulatory incidents that were mentioned in the previous talk. And here we can really see just how far lanternfly propagules have spread, not necessarily established, but have spread through time. And so you can take a look at how that's sort of spreading as well. And this gives you a better sense just, okay, well, is my state or is the county that I'm interested in, is it close to an area that has lanternfly? Or is it close to an area, that has had propagules of lanternfly spread there? And so all of this entire app here was developed by my postdoc, Seba de Bona. So I'm going to have pictures up in the right-hand corner of the people who's really pushed these. And this was based on cleaning and aggregating data across multiple states and lots of different areas. So now let's talk a little bit about the high-risk areas applications that we developed, and basically addressing this question of where should we survey for spotted lanternfly. And so there's a variety of different applications that we have. The first one I'm going to point you to is just one based on establishment risk. So this is a statistical niche model and mapping application. It's a similar type of modeling approach that Dr. Urban showed at the end of her talk. So let's go ahead and switch over to that. So if you head over to this application, you can change the different layers. So here what I have is just the establishment potential across the United States and across the Earth. The more red areas are areas that are predicted to have higher establishment potential. You can overlay wine regions, and if you look at this, you can see that where spotted lanternfly is most likely to establish are also areas, where there are lots of wine growing regions. We can zoom in different areas. Here, I'll just zoom into California, for example. And so if you're thinking about where to survey, for example, you can take a look and ask yourself, okay, is this area a place, that has grapes growing in it based on some data that we put up here, and is it an area that has a high likelihood of having spotted lanternfly established or a low likelihood of having spotted lanternfly established? And so it helps to use these maps also just to make visual presentations for your state or for stakeholders to sort of show, okay, well, if lanternfly does get to my area, where is it most likely to establish? We've also developed a set of transport risk apps. And so here what we've done is we've collaborated with stakeholders. Mostly this is the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. And what we did was we constructed a list of property types that are thought to have a high risk of transporting or importing lanternfly. And so we've developed a handful of these applications, and this year we're going to really ramp up our building these applications. This is the one for Pennsylvania, for example. This risk estimate here, this is that establishment risk that we saw in the previous application. And then these points here all indicate clusters of high transport risk localities. And so if we can zoom into different areas, for example, we could zoom in here into southeastern Pennsylvania, lots and lots of different places to survey, for example, and then you can go to these different areas. Here, this, for example, is a landscaping company. You can then click on that landscaping company, click on view Google Maps, and that'll give you driving directions to that landscaping company if you wanted to survey that area. We have up here also the different county scale sampling maps. And so these are gridded data sets that are put up on there. So if you want to just survey in a particular grid, you can also use this map too. And then we've been doing some statistical modeling to ask the question of, based on all these huge data sets that we've been able to gather, which one of these different types of properties are most associated with the actual data that we've seen, with these jump dispersal or long distance transport dispersal events. And a lot of insight from people working in the field have argued that, it seems like railroads are spreading these species. And that's exactly what we're seeing with our data. It's that railroads, clearly they're sort of following railroads, or the long distance jump dispersal events are happening at railroad depots. But we're also finding some other estimates, such as, for example, Amazon fulfillment centers seem to be associated with some of these jump dispersal events as well. This is all just for the state of Pennsylvania. And so you can take a look at that. And this app is currently under construction. So let's go ahead and start thinking about forecasts. And so this is what will be the population dynamics of spotted lanternfly. And so we have a variety of apps on here, including the ones by Penn State and USDA, where you can look at their age hatch and developmental forecast too. Just going to focus on these three here that were developed with my team at Temple University. And so first, I'll show you a host map app. And so this application helps to address this question of, besides the tree of heaven, which tree species should we survey for spotted lanternfly? And so it's a statistical model. It tries to infer spotted lanternfly feeding preferences on tree species found across the United States, and then we map those. So let's take a look at this application. And so what we have here then is a map of, here we have California, but you can choose different states, for example. We have an estimate of host risk. And so this here is just a weighted measure of the number of tree hosts that are found in these different counties based on a USDA data set. The number of tree hosts that are likely to be hosts for spotted lanternfly. And so you can click on a particular county, for example, and that'll then give you different lists here in the host list in terms of the known hosts and potential tree hosts here. And then we can go to different states, for example. So here, click on Sacramento, then gives me the list of all the species. And then we have a predictive preference. And then whether or not it's actually been observed to feed or not feed. And here we're focusing just on the feeding by adults. And so that time when the feeding can be most heavy and when feeding can be most damaging to a tree or to other plant hosts. And so you can click on different states. For example, we'll go to Arkansas for example. This map will then change and go to Arkansas. And you can zoom around on the map and look at your state. And so if you're going to a particular county in your state, for example, and you want to know, okay, well, besides Tree of Heaven, should I be looking at other hosts that they might actually be feeding on? Then this application can potentially help you as well. Let's see here. Just want to make sure that these two are running. Great. And so let's get back to this goal that we have here. We're trying to predict spotted lanternfly population dynamics. And so we're thinking about the growth side of the equation and also the dispersal side of the equation here. And we have two different models that we've been looking at this. And so first, we're just going to focus on the growth side of the equation. And so we've been working quite closely with a set of mathematicians, including Stephanie, who's a postdoc who's developed a really sophisticated mathematical model that, among many other things, besides predicting growth dynamics, can also be used to calculate the basic reproductive number for spotted lanternfly. And so if a number is above 1, then you have positive spotted lanternfly growth. If a number is below 1, then you would have a declining population growth. And so you want to push your system or push your area, push your county, for example, into a state where you have declining spotted lanternfly growth. So let's go ahead and see this happen. And I'll walk you through it. So this is the app here. It's a map of the entire United States. That's what you can see. The more blue area counties. This is at the county scale here, and we have we're working on getting a finer resolution map here. But this is just for counties. The blue areas are predicted to have, on average, it isn't for like one particular year, but this is just an on average estimate, are predicted to have on average low population growth to declining population growth, where the red areas are areas predicted to have higher population growth, where spotted lanternfly can successfully establish. One of the questions that was in the chat was, how is this species, how has it adapted to our climate? And one way that this species has adapted to the climate is by evolving diapause. And so in this model, what we've done is we've built a model based solely on the developmental rate of Tree of Heaven, solely on the developmental rate of maple. And this is based on data collected by our collaborators. And so these are Tree of Heaven and maple that are found in the wild, but they're looking just at those individuals that were feeding on these hosts. So we have developmental rates on these two hosts. And then we're able to turn on and turn off diapause. And so if you were just looking at the Tree of Heaven diapause model, if you look at a Tree of Heaven non-diapause model, we can really see the influence that diapause has on allowing this species to establish in a huge part of the United States, more in the temperate climates. And so as we start to move, as the species starts to move further and further south, it's in Southern Virginia now, it's going to continue to spread south, it'll start getting into this zone where it doesn't necessarily need diapause in order for it to have positive population growth. And so what's going to happen in this area, for example, here, where it doesn't need diapause? We know that diapause is potentially plastic. There could be reduced selection on that. Another thing that I want to point out here is that we can compare the Tree of Heaven model to the maple model. And so let's just focus here sort of on this edge of what we're expecting here. And we're looking at Scranton, Pennsylvania here. So if you look at a Tree of Heaven model, if lanternfly in this area are feeding on a lot of Tree of Heaven, we expect it to have positive population growth. We expect it to establish. But on the other hand, let's say that we remove all the Tree of Heaven and we just say, okay, it's feeding on maple or the other hosts that are out there. Then in this area here, we actually expect it to have negative. So this is at least a model estimated verification that by removing Tree of Heaven, you likely reduce the establishment risk for spotted lanternfly in your area. So that was sort of the growth side of the equation. Let's talk about the dispersal side of the equation here. So we developed a very basic spread forecasting app just based on all the data that's out there that we've been able to collect and based on the way that other forest pests in the United States have spread. And so it leverages a whole lot of data to try and build this application. So we'll take a look at that now. So this is the application, a very similar map interface. And so here, I want to be really clear that what we're predicting here is spread risk. We're not saying that, you know, this county will get it in 5 years and this county will get it in 6 years. Instead, we're saying that the risk of these counties getting it in those few years is increasing. So that's a way to sort of think about this. And so if you can sort of run this model in the future, we're only running it out for about 20 years. At these longer timescales, and I'll talk about this at the end, at this longer timescales, predicting really what's going to happen with lanternfly because of all these long distance dispersal events is quite difficult. And so we can see, you know, areas such as the Chicagoland region as being areas that have a higher risk of getting lanternfly, you know, sooner potentially than even areas in between that Chicagoland area. And then if we just run this model out to sort of at the point where we have it out there, we can see sort of this North Pacific Northwest area also lighting up as potential areas. And so that's just one way to sort of visualize the potential risk of lanternfly spreading, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what's going to happen next year, for example. And so let's unpack that statement that I just made and really how should we address this complexity in this system? And so back to my action message, predictive modeling really only provides an estimate of risk. And so here's an example of that. So the LA Rams just won the Super Bowl. Were they predicted to win the Super Bowl? And the answer to that is not really. You know, back preseason, the LA Rams were predicted to have about a 5% chance of winning the Super Bowl. The Bengals were predicted to have even less than 1% chance of winning the Super Bowl. And so those predictions way back preseason were actually quite difficult to make. Even on the day of the Super Bowl, so this is the day of the Super Bowl, the Rams are forecasted to only have about a 68% chance of winning the Super Bowl. And for those of you who watched the game, they came really close to losing the Super Bowl. And so these sophisticated models that have been developed for sports betting and sports predictions and forecasting aren't even that great. And why is that? And that's because human behavior itself is incredibly complex, and trying to predict what humans are going to do is incredibly difficult. And so let's continue with this idea. So predictive modeling, like I said, is forecasting. And so if we think about forecasting, my mother-in-law does not like the nightly weather forecast because they say just about everything so that something is right. I joke, but if we think about what weather forecasting is the most sophisticated forecasting that humans have developed. But a 10-day weather forecast is only right about half the time. And we have satellites that are monitoring the entire Earth. We have sophisticated mathematical climate models. And so why is that? It's because it's such a complex system. And so these long-term weather forecasts are incredibly coarse. And so this is NOAA's forecast for the winter. They did this, you know, last year in November or so. You know, it roughly gets what's happening, but day-to-day forecasts and everything, it's really, really coarse. And so our sophisticated forecasting for weather, even for long time periods, like we're thinking about the spread of lanternfly, are incredibly coarse. And that's because just like human behavior, nature is incredibly complex. So I'm using this term complexity in the scientific term because predictive modeling inherently is complexity science. It's a component of complexity science. So complexity in the scientific sense is what arises in any system in which many agents interact and adapt to one another and their environments. And so this is just an agent-based model that one of my graduate students working with the mathematicians is trying to develop for spotted lanternfly. So you can think about each one of these different agents moving around. And these complex systems are incredibly difficult to forecast with high accuracy because of all these different agents doing their own thing. So the SLF invasion, and this is going to have management implications, is an incredibly complex system. The agents in this system are all these individual lanternfly that are spreading, all these humans that are spreading lanternfly and trying to control lanternfly, et cetera, and then all the plant hosts and other things that are interacting in this system. And so trying to forecast these complex systems can be quite difficult. So a take-home message here, a summary of this then, is that these predictive models that I will continue to develop, that many others will continue to develop to try and help everyone out with this lanternfly invasion. These models can only tell you about risk, but they're not going to tell you about what will absolutely happen. And so let's continue with this idea a little bit. So there was a recent find in Indiana, for example. This find in Indiana, this is southern Indiana, right on the border with Kentucky. This find in Indiana was not forecastable, but it is expected. It is expected that these types of long distance dispersal events are going to happen. It was likely an introduction from a single person or a single family moving homes from Pennsylvania into Indiana, and that's how they spread there. So then, using these applications that I showed you, using the types of models that you'll be seeing continuously as we continue to develop our science, use these apps to survey the areas of high risk. We know where there's areas of high risk, but then try and buffer your state or buffer your area from expected and unforecastable introductions, like what I talked to you about with that Indiana introduction. How then do we do that? How do we buffer our state? Here's just three sort of actions that I think that all of you should think about. Perform outreach early and at statewide scales, because the more people that know about lanternfly, how it's spreading, then the less likely you're going to have sort of these expected introductions by a single person moving home or moving some equipment or something. There'll be more people who are looking for lanternfly, either people who are accidentally bringing it in or people who are in your particular state looking for that lanternfly pest. So perform that outreach early and try to blanket the whole state. When surveying, when you're out there and you're surveying high-risk locations, then bring horticultural oil, bring any sort of treatment that works, so that if you see spotted lanternfly in a location, you can treat that location right away. Because spotted lanternfly are moving, because humans are moving spotted lanternfly, even by waiting a few days or a week, you might come back to that location to say, treat lanternfly, and they may have already either moved on or you can't find them anymore. So get out there early and treat them as soon as you find them. And then finally, one way to also buffer areas is by removing tree of heaven. That does seem to experimentally reduce your risk of establishment. And so finally, let's just talk a little bit about predictive modeling and the needs for many models. And so many models combined make better forecasts. Every model makes different assumptions, and by combining multiple models, you find the most robust predictions. And so I do hope that all of you will join us at the Spotted Lanternfly Research Summit. You'll learn about these models that underpin these apps I talked about, and also other models that are being developed too that are really important. And so that's at March 1st at 2 p.m. So definitely come and check that out. And so finally, for our third take-home message here, compare multiple models and applications when designing your response to the spotted lanternfly invasion. Get as much information as you can. Use these apps, know that they're risk, and compare and contrast the different models and apps to try and figure out where they're overlapping. And then certainly, for those of you who are interested or have questions, you should reach out to those people who develop the apps. So I welcome you to take a look at slf.iecolab.org. That'll take you directly to the Spotted Lanternfly dashboard. On that dashboard, you can click around and take a look at the apps. There's a feedback form. You can also email and ask any questions that you have. There's a help file there that'll hopefully describe what each one of the applications does. Okay, so thank you so very much. We've been funded by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, USDA, and also the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And a lot of postdocs, grad students, and undergraduates have worked on these applications that I talked to you about today. Great, I'm happy to take any questions if there's time.
Well, thank you, Matt. We appreciate it. I don't see any questions in there. So I'll ask one, kind of off the cuff, but you know, and it's kind of jokingly, but you know, with all the different things that come into play as far as making these models, and then the different models that take in different factors, you know, leave Chicago alone, would you? No. No, I want to, you know, we've used these tools and this information for a multitude of reasons. You know, we don't have it here, but when you're trying to convince people that either you're, you know, looking for it, you need to look for it, or, you know, you're at risk and why, you know, these tools are fantastic to justify that from a scientific perspective. you know, it's easy to get, and not taking anything away from anybody, but it's easy to get on the news or get on the internet and find a news story about spotted lanternfly all over the place. But when you have data and information like this that can actually, um, you know, take that scientific information and say, yes, you are at risk because of A, B, and C, it goes a long way. So knowing the nature of this programming, and the folks that are on here maybe early on within their careers, or potentially new states that are kind of coming on to the interest of spotted lanternfly, this information is going to be valuable for your planning and your education and outreach early on. So that was kind of a tongue in cheeky a little bit, but really in all seriousness, it's fantastic information. And I thought the treehouse model was really cool. I think that's another tool in the toolbox that we can use from not only the forestry perspective, but also the nursery perspective. So thank you very much. Any parting thoughts or anything?
I mean, with a lot of these applications, you know, to take the football analogy, it's very much sort of, you know, preseason here. You know, we're still trying to figure out what we need to put in these models to make them more accurate. And so all of these tools will be constantly refined and refined. And so as we're building these new tools and building these different models, I think that we'll start to increase our accuracy and maybe be able to start predicting some of these long distance dispersal events a little bit better. But as a whole, I really, really think, you know, expect there to be long distance dispersal events that you don't expect or that can't be forecastable. And by being here and taking action early, I think that you can catch those, at least catch some of them early, to then tamp them down and maybe not, and maybe actually slow the spread of lanternfly then. Chicago, I'm sorry.
I've come to accept it. I've come to accept it. Yep. Well, Dr. Helmus, thank you so much. We appreciate it, and great work you're doing for all of us. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Scott.
Cool.